Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program. Hello, I'm Mara Lynn Luther from Chapter 1 Bookstore in Hamilton, Montana. And joining me today is Cassandra Ramos-Gomez. She's a Mexican-American writer focused on creating middle grade and young adult fiction that centers Latinx experiences. She has a master's degree in education and an undergraduate degree in art history, and she has taught middle school language arts and social studies. She currently lives in Texas with her husband and 2 kids. Her hobbies include painting, collecting animal bones, and playing Minecraft with her kids. Lost on Doll Island is her middle grade debut. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cassandra.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It
It's
was
my first
great.
podcast.
Oh, me too.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yay.
It's our first podcast, so we're just gonna figure it out. We were so excited, I think, as the Indies Introduced panel to have middle grade horror, because for lots of us, that was very pivotal for our own young reading. And so it was really exciting to have a spooky pick.
Yay. I'm glad that you guys even looked at it at all was a huge honor. So the fact that it was chosen was, it was just all amazing and surreal. So thank you guys for enjoying it, for reading it at all, and for enjoying it.
Yeah, we sure did. So this was your middle grade debut. Have you done any other writing, and was it spooky?
Yeah, actually, so I'm I have on submission right now a young adult book that is more, I guess, like speculative than spooky. It's more like an afterlife story. And then I also have another book that I had written before this one that was middle grades, and it was a little spooky. It was a girl who was she'd accidentally summoned La Llorona with in her bathroom, and so from there it was just kind of like a little bit of like a embarrassing moments kind of book. But that one went on sub and then just never got picked up, and so we just shelved it for a while, and then um, this one was the one I wrote after that, and here we are now. So
That's awesome. For those who don't know what Lost on Doll Island is about, um, it's about Diego, who is spending time in Mexico with family because his parents
Mhm.
are going through a divorce. And I think that particular childhood experience is going to speak to a lot of kids, whether they're going through it themselves or they know kids who are. Is there a reason that you included that for your character, Diego?
I think divorce during that time period, especially in middle grades, that's around when that starts to happen. It doesn't, not for all kids, but in my case, I was in middle school when my parents got divorced. So it just kind of seems like a common growing up. Unfortunately, it's a common growing up trope now. And so, like you said, a lot of kids have experienced it or they understand being kind of having feelings towards both parents that may be different. Um, and then also maybe taking on responsibility for the divorce, even though it's not their fault at all. They somehow feel because they are part of the family dynamic that they are somewhat responsible for the stuff going on in their family. So I wanted to include those feelings, even though it is a book for middle grade children. I do think they are dealing with a lot of heavy stuff, and so I think they can handle it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then there's also sort of the deeper piece of Diego being of an age where he's trying to figure out like what a man is and
Mm-hmm.
how a man behaves in sort of scary situations and what bravery is. And so I think that's really going to be powerful too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he gets set up with some spooky doll action right away, which I love. What do you think makes dolls in particular so darn creepy?
Well, I obviously had a lot of time to think about this when I was writing the book and doing research on dolls. And um, dolls in particular, I think it has something to do with like our brains are kind of programmed to recognize faces. And so we see a doll, you want to give it like human qualities, but it's because it's a doll and it's an object. It just it's not going to give you the responses you want. So it's going to be unblinking, it's going to be still, it's going to be um, you're going to be expecting it to move and it's not going to move. And it's just there's kind of like that creepy, unsettling vibe. But I think it has to do with the fact that like we're just kind of wired to recognize faces, and that looks like a human, but it's not behaving like one. So I think that's what makes them a little creepy and unsettling, especially if there's like something wrong about them, like they're disheveled or their eyes kind of seem to move when you're in their vicinity. For me personally, though, I actually really like dolls, and I feel like I'm going to be one of those old ladies that just collects a bunch of them because I just want to take care of them. So,
I hope you do. You could make a little like safe haven. Like, did someone think you were spooky? Come live at my house.
yeah, my kids would hate that, but you know, maybe I'll make a little corner for it away from them.
Yeah, there you go. You said you researched dolls. Was there anything in your research that was extra surprising, or I
Oh
want
yeah,
now I'm so curious about what doll research looks like.
I okay. So I loved. There's certain things about certain dolls that are really particular. Like why certain dolls came into being like there's a. I actually have this doll called like a Ginny doll. That's like when she was manufactured at the time, it was kind of a big deal to have a doll for that was with like movable parts and that were affordable and accessible to all girls. Like, so that was kind of I guess the big deal with her was that she was being mass produced, and that was a huge deal at the time. I don't know. I researched a lot of different dolls, so I might have gotten that fact wrong. But the one that I really did like the best was the Edison doll, and she comes into the book at some point. I do mention an Edison doll, and it's just because I had to. I was like, I have to include this somehow. And those were invented. Well, I don't know if he invented them, but he certainly did make them. Was Thomas Edison, and so he wanted to have these um, talking dolls, and it would have been like a huge deal. No one had done this before, and it was like the latest technology with this like a almost like a little record inside that would play, but they were a total bust. People hated them. They were only on the market for like 6 weeks, and people hated them because they're too creepy. Um,
We could
and they
have
still
totally told him that.
yeah, yeah, they're just too creepy. Well, part of the reason they're creepy is I mean just the fact that they're singing lullabies, and that's part of it, but it's also they're recorded on wax cylinders, so the voice is kind of warped a little bit. Even like when they were made, there's just not a very good material to record on. And then the other thing about it that's creepy is that because of the way the recordings were made, he hired factory girls to record onto. So they were girls who were working in factories for other things, and he just kind of like pulled them from the floor and was like, "Hey, I need you to record this." But because they're shouting over the machinery, to get the recording, they're like really screaming. And so like they're screaming lullabies like if I die before I wake, I pray this Lord, my soul to take. But like they're screaming it. And so it's creepy for many reasons. There's a reason they didn't make it, but they're in the Smithsonian, so that's cool.
Thanks, Thomas Edison. Do you, as you're writing about these dolls, do you ever creep yourself out? Or like ever in any of your spooky stories as you're writing? Like do you have to be like, oh, I think I'm gonna turn the light on, or I maybe I just need to go get a glass of water or
Take
something.
a break. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to at first I was like, oh no, I'm not scared of my own stories. But there actually are moments when I'm writing when I'm building tension or suspense in a scene, especially. So not the actual scary moments or the jump scares themselves. Those are not too scary. But if I'm building up the suspense and I'm really thinking about how a character is behaving in a scene or how they would feel in a certain environment. So if I have in like say in like a dark attic, then I'm thinking about like how would they what how would the air feel, what would they smell, what would be the creepy emotion, like what would be the sensations of being like when you feel like you're being seen but no one's there, or no one's there but you still have that feeling. How would your spine feel, how would your all of those things that I'm thinking about as I'm writing, when I get into that space, I do sometimes give myself the chills and I have to like take a take a breather. So, but I usually write in my kitchen with the big like sliding glass door next to me. So it's a very bright, happy place. It's not too hard to like step away and be like, okay, this is just fiction, Cass.
Well, that's good because we want you to keep writing, so you can't spook yourself out too much. Specifically for Lost on Doll Island, were there any scenes that came to you that just didn't make it into the book, or details that popped up in your imagination that we didn't get to read?
Well, yeah, so this particular book had some earlier drafts, and I think at the beginning, the disembodied voice of the doll was not actually, she wasn't a disembodied voice. It was an actual doll that was with Diego throughout the story. So in the earlier drafts, it was an actual doll. It was like walking around and talking. Um, and so I eventually got rid of that simply because it was more comical than scary. Like it leans more funny. And so
Yeah.
it's really hard to make it creepy and not I mean, especially if it's a doll that's kind of like a wisecracker, they're trying to like, it comes off a little bit like a little gnome or something, and that's just more funny than scary. And
Yeah.
so not the vibe I was going for, so I had to take a lot of that out. But there were some really like fun moments. I mean, it was fun to write. It just wasn't what I was going for.
Yeah. Yeah. You can remember that later if you need some kind of, humor to sprinkle into something that's scary.
Yeah, definitely.
I was excited to find out that there was a real doll island. Um,
Mhm.
and so I'm curious about that, and also if the origin of the real place is what you said in your book, or if you changed that at all.
Well, the real place is La Isla de las Muñecas, or Doll Island, or the Island of the Dolls. This has a few different names, but it is in Xochimilco, or along the Xochimilco canals in Mexico City. So it's like a borough of Mexico City, um, along the lake, and it's a real place. And all those islands have been there since like pre-colonial times. So they are man-made islands, but they've been there for a long time. And so I tried to include as much of the real history as I could into the book. Uh, because I wanted the kids to, if a kid's reading it and they Google it, I wanted them to have like, yeah, that's like what I saw in the book. This is the story. And they can look at it on the maps, or you can look for it on TripAdvisor. It's there. um, but it's a real place. And the lore of it is that a man named, I think his name was Don Julian Santana Barrera, I think. And so he collected, well, his reason for collecting all those dolls was the story changes depending on who tells it, but um, originally the story was that he found a dead girl or he failed at rescuing a girl. The story is kind of mixed there. That's where it gets muddy. It's like, did he fail to rescue a girl or did he find the dead girl? Nobody knows. But then the next day he found a doll in the same canal and he assumed it was hers. And so he put it up as a memorial to her and also as like a token or a talisman to ward off evil. And then he just continued to find dolls and put them up all over the island, because he felt that it was haunted or that she was still lingering. And so this was kind of to like appease her spirit. And I mean, he did this for decades. And so they're all over that little island everywhere. And he found dolls in dumpsters. He found dolls along the lake, wherever he could find one, he put one up. And so the place is really, really spooky. Um, and the thing is because it is like based on local legend, there's not actually like a real girl or person that died that they can find. Like it's not in newspapers. There's no name to the person. So I don't know if that actually happened. So I don't want to put too much of those details on my book because they're a little bit grim, but also I don't know how much of that is true. So I just kind of kept it as um, I tried to keep it uh, as I guess as not as vague, but I just tried to keep it as true as I could without making stuff up in that regard for
Yeah,
that
you
island.
like mysterious. You kept the mystery piece of
Yeah.
that what happened? Why are these dolls here? Uh,
Yeah.
the Diego's relationship with his new friends struck me also because in middle school, sometimes there's that moment if you don't have already like a real tight group of friends of like, is this kid cool enough for me to hang out with? And it's not a
Hmm.
thing that we're proud of, but I feel like everyone has felt that at one time or another. Do you want to talk a little bit just about his journey as far as meeting kids and trying to figure out if he's going to be their friend or not?
Yeah, I think when he first gets there, I mean, Itzel is his friend almost by default because she's the neighbor
Right.
and she's always hanging around. And then Handro becomes his friend because he stands up for him against a bully. But again, it's very much like by default, and he's not sure he wants these kids to be his friends. His friends. Because he's a little bit embarrassed by them because they're kind of into the same things he's into, but he's not proud of being into those things. He's not proud of being into rocks. He's not proud of being into Minecraft. He's not proud of being into gaming. Those are all things that he feels he has to hide to be cool. And so these kids, because they're into all those same things, but they're really open about their interest, he thinks they're uncool. He thinks that they are uncool. And so I kind of felt that I wanted to add that in because, like you said, that is a very common feeling or experience for middle schoolers to go through, especially if they're new to middle school. Or I myself was new to my middle school, not just to the middle school, but to the area because my parents were stationed in Germany and then we moved right before seventh grade. So I didn't, so all the kids at this middle school, they may have not, we were all new to the middle school, but a lot of them knew each other from elementary school and the elementary schools that were funneling into that school. And and I didn't know anyone. Um, and so yeah, you kind of have to do those weird like that weird mental math or social math of like, wait, if I talk to this person, will these other girls not talk to me anymore? Or if I hang out with, and like you said, it's a very shameful thing looking back now and be like, why did I even care? But we're all friends on Facebook now.
Yeah, there you
but but yeah, it's at the time, I think you do kind of do a lot of that weird social assessment. And I think Diego does a lot of that social assessment and trying to figure out if he should be hanging out with these kids or not, and if he looks cool, or if he actually wants to be as close of friends as they want to be. But the
go.
truth of the matter is, he doesn't really have a lot of choice because they're hanging out with him anyway.
And then he pulls them into all sorts of hijinks.
Yes.
So I would be friends with him after all of that.
Mhm.
Just to bring it back to dolls one more time, I
Mhm.
know that I had an American Girl doll named Samantha when I was a kid and was inseparable with her. And then at some point, she became a little scary. And I think it started with like me wanting to make sure I said goodnight to her every night and then feeling like, oh no, if I say goodnight to her, then I have to make sure to say goodnight to all my stuffed animals. And so then it became this like weird ritual for me, not out of like actual affection,
Like
but for like
obligation.
fear of, yeah, retribution or something. Did you have any strange toy or doll practices when you were a kid?
Phew. I like what you're saying does sound super familiar. I did feel like if I did something with one doll, I had to do it with all of them or like line them up all like we're playing together. We're all playing together. We're all included because you don't want to get the scorn of like the mean one. But in terms of like rituals, I can't really think of anything that I did like ritualistically with my doll. I did have like Barbies where I would continue their storyline. So we'd have little episodes or stories, like little bottle episodes, I guess. And then there would be the wider overarching story that I had that going on. So for example, and this was probably the strangest thing I did with my Barbies was I had one of them, it was like a story about peer pressure. So I was like 9 or maybe 8, and I came up with this story of like, they're all going to peer pressure each other into cutting off their toes to join their club. Like, so if you wanted to be cool and pretty, you had to cut off your toes. And then a new Barbie came and she didn't have cut toes and they were snubbing her. And she's like, but I'm not going to cut my toes for you. You know. And so, and then of course, cutting your toes fell out of fashion. And so those girls who had their toes cut off, they were left with their toes cut off because they're Barbies. Um, and that's probably the strangest story I came up with. And people would come up and be like, well, why do the dolls look like that? And I'd have to explain like, oh, because they fell into the trend. They fell into the bad
It was
cat.
at the time. Yeah, exactly. Like
And
some Barbies did.
yeah,
Some Barbies cut their toes off. I think it's awesome that you had overarching like storylines because now you're an author. So like of course you were telling this like elaborate, it wasn't just a one scene thing. You're like, I have this whole
they
elaborate
have backstories.
yeah, exactly. Are you writing something right now that's exciting to you? I know you have something that's in submission, but do you like move right on to the next thing or do you take a little break?
Well, the thing that was on submission is still on submission, but I got a revision, like a revise and resubmit prompt, and so I actually just finished that, and I'm really excited for the way that that's been revised. But I don't want to go too far into it because it's like it's still on submission, and I did have another middle grade story. It's not spooky though, so I don't know how far I want to move in with it, but it was inspired by Karina Evans' book about periods. It's the book about a girl getting her period and her like she's like excited about the summer. So that was Karina's book, um, and so I wanted to do a period book too, but I was like, how can I make like a period book that's my own, like about a girl getting her, her first period, but I wanted it to be like she's faking that she has her period to look cool. Like all her friends have their period and she's a late bloomer. And so she's faking it. And so I kind of had a story like that. So it's again another story about like trying to fit in and, you
Mhm.
know, having shenanigans ensue because of that. And just, when you're not true to yourself, things happen, I guess. So,
But middle schoolers, you're gonna survive. You'll make it through middle school. You'll find yourself. And I think
mhm,
that's the, at least at the end of Doll Island, like that was kind of your message. It's like you're gonna find your people no matter where you are.
yeah. And they'll accept you for who you are for all the things that you are ashamed of are actually the things that make you cool and they can see that about you. And so I would hope that readers get that from it. And um I think actually just the my old middle school has reached out to me. The librarian from my old middle school reached out to me recently. So where
Yeah.
I went to middle school, they are like, oh, well, maybe we can do a visit. So I would have to go back to El Paso for it. And we still haven't gotten, all the permissions because it's Texas and you have to get your book approved by a board beforehand. So it's still like up in the air. But it is really exciting to know, like, hey, my book might be read at the middle school I went to. Yeah,
That's
how
so
cool.
cool. Yeah, it's so cool for those students to be like, she was here and now she's writing stories.
Yeah, so that's really exciting for me right now. So that's kind of like that's what's on the horizon for me right now, and that's where most of my excitement is.
Awesome. Well, that is excellent news. Thank you so much again for chatting. This was lovely. Nice to
This
talk
was
to
super
you.
cool, and thank you for making my first podcast experience just really easy and exciting and fun.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!